This is the Handy Ma'am Hotline, where we answer your home repair questions with compassion and love. My name is Mercury Stardust, and today we have an amazing set of questions for you that are all involving plumbing, all the way from clogged sinks, worms in your drain, and then the mental crisis you may have when you are facing mold. That and more on this episode of the Handy Ma'am Hotline.
Mercury Stardust. She's a beacon of hope in the darkest night. Mercury Stardust. She'll teach you how to make it all alright.
Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, boy, does it feel good to be back in the saddle today. I gotta tell you, it's been over a year since we have recorded the very last Handy Ma'am Hotline. And boy, am I excited that we are bringing this show back. And this time around, it's me talking directly to all of you and answering your questions by myself. Oh my God, did she get confidence? Well, it's been a wonderful year since we have spoken last on this podcast. But I have to tell you, the overarching vibe to all of it is change. Change has been on the horizon for us in a lot of different ways. Not just me as a company, not just my life as a trans handyman, but also when it comes to the world and the geopolitics of all of it. It feels like it can be crushing sometimes when we are just a little leaf in the wind being carried from one tragic thing to another sometimes. But I gotta tell you, there's nothing that makes me happier than finding community wherever I can, connecting with people all across this country. When I was on my book tour, I met so many people, 20,000 people, and we have talked about so many things. But recently I went to Arkansas, and I met people in Arkansas who had some amazing stories. And it reconnected me with the world that I think that I have gotten lost in sometimes. You know, me and Zizi, my wonderful spouse mouse, we just moved into our very first house. We have done amazing things in the past year, but the world still keeps on spinning, and sometimes it feels like it gets out of control. But that's where this all comes in. Finding community and connecting with one another and feeling like we are a little less lost together is better than nothing. And that's where I'm at right now. And I am going to guess that you are probably in the same boat I am. We don't really know where the world's going to go. We don't know what's going to happen from day to day. But what we do know is that home repairs are going to need to be made still. And you may need help along the way. And that's what we are going to focus on. So without further ado, on the very first podcast of the new version of the Handy Ma'am Hotline, let's answer our first question ever.
Hi, Mercury. My name is Paige. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a big fan. I love watching your TikToks. I was wondering about my sink in my bathroom. Since I've moved into my current house, it has always been really slow to drain, but I don't know how to unclog it because the little plug doesn't really come out. It's tied to something in the pipe. I've tried putting Drano down it, but nothing's happened. If you have any advice, I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
First and foremost, what a frustrating experience that so many people have. You know, that, I should remind you that you should never feel bad about things like this because so many people go through a clogged drain. Boy, I feel like it's a universal feeling that we all have, either when we are on the toilet and the toilet's clogged, and boy, is that not a harrowing moment. Or when we are, washing our hands in a sink and it ain't going down. This is all universal things that a lot of us face. But what should be our knee-jerk reaction? Where should we start? First and foremost, your brain is not going in a bad direction. You have a good idea of what you kind of supposed to be doing. I'm going to fill in the gaps, though, because there's some things I think you might want to know if you're going farther with this repair yourself. First and foremost, stay away from chemical drain cleaners. Now, I know that's a controversial statement. A lot of people are going to fight all day about it in the comments. And I got to tell you right now, with all my years of experience, chemical drain cleaners cause more of a pain in the butt most of the time than they do actually solve the problems. Now, the knee-jerk reaction, when you can't see a problem, you want to solve it without having to really worry about it, right? You can't see in the drain. So your knee-jerk reaction is going to be, let me take this and just dump it in there. And I get that. That makes sense. But what I think a lot of folks don't always understand is that you don't really eat away with those chemicals. Those chemicals don't just make everything magically go away. What they do is loosen up the clog and send it farther down the line most of the time. Most of your drains, especially when we're talking about sinks, bathroom sinks specifically, will have hair buildup in it. It's almost universal that every single bathroom in this country and probably elsewhere has a lot of hair in the sink drain. That is not an abnormal thing. Different products we use with our hair might cause larger backups. Like you might be using gel in your hair a lot. That gel can build up. Various kinds of gels can build up in the drain with the hair, which can clog and become kind of a little mini rock in your drain. That will be a bigger problem, right? The thing is, there are products that are a little bit more effective from a chemical standpoint than just your regular Drano. Drano is fine. I'm not going to sit here and just poop on it all of a sudden, But my personal favorite chemical drain cleaner, if you're going to use one, is going to be anything that has 100% lye in it. So specifically Thrift. Thrift is one of my favorite products. When you are just dealing with hair, it is going to have a much better luck dissolving hair and actually getting rid of most of it instead of Drano and other stuff that's going to be better at getting rid of grime. It's going to be really good at cleaning it, but not necessarily dissolving that hair. And that's what you want to do in an ideal condition. Now, I'm saying ideal condition for one specific reason, because your pipes are not ideal. A lot of times, I don't know if you've been scrolling late at night, but when I was a kid and when I would be scrolling on the good old TV late at night, you would have these info commercials and they would show you this clear glass that has water in one and hair in it. And then it has another glass that is clear that has Drano in it. And they put hair in it. And then over the course of 3 hours, it dissolves. And there's a few things that I find hilarious about that. Number one, a glass is not a pipe. And I don't know why I need to say that, but it's true. A glass is not a pipe. And a glass is so much cleaner. It's often way smoother, and all of that really matters when we're talking about collecting grime and talked about collecting dirt in your drain. All of that is going to make that chemical that you're pouring down, regardless if it's Drano or Green Gobbler or, Liquid Heat, any of those at all, including Thrift, any of those products, they're going to get weaker the more moisture they're hitting. And if your clog is 8, 10, 15, 20 feet down that drain, well, that's a lot of work and a lot of trust you're having on that chemical drain cleaner. And that's a lot of work. It's probably not going to be nearly as effective when it gets there. So it being concentrated, all those 8 ounces being concentrated in one glass in one specific spot, and then you put hair in it, and then it dissolves it in an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Well, that's great, but you should never let Drano sit there that long on a pipe. If you look at the directions of most of these chemical drain cleaners, they tell you don't leave it sitting for more than 30 minutes. It's because some of these drain cleaners can, in fact, interact with your piping in not a fun way. Cast iron pipe is a really good example. If it's old enough and it's beat up already, and then you're putting a bunch of Drano on it, and you just let that Drano sit for several hours, yeah, I mean, there's a chance it could go right through it. That does and can happen. But typically, you wash it out. You dilute it, essentially, and you make sure that it's not sitting in that same spot for that long period of time. So the fact that it takes an hour to 4 hours for it to dissolve in your clear glass of water is no indication that's what it's doing in your drain. So don't let those wonderful, terrible info commercials fool you. They're not going to help you the way you think it might help you.
Darn, my sink trap's clogged.
Do you know what's clogging it?
Who knows what's down there? Grease, food, hair.
Better use Crystal Drano, the all-purpose drain opener.
Isn't liquid plumber's all-purpose?
No, it may not work on tough grease clogs.
Well, Drano.
Yes, Drano works on grease and food and hair.
Wow! I never know what the clog is, so I'll use all-purpose Drano.
Drano, the all-purpose drain opener.
Another thing that you brought up is your stopper, your actual stopper that you push up and down, and then this little stopper pops up in your sink, and then that's where you would put a snake or some type of auger, right? That actually isn't where I would recommend putting most of your augers and your snakes and trying to unclog something. I would go underneath your sink, and I would remove something called a P-trap. See, a P-trap is basically an upside-down P-shape thing underneath your sink, okay? It looks more like a U, but somebody thought it was a really funny idea to think about it being upside down and called it a P. I don't know why. Why not a B-trap? A B-trap makes way more sense. Because it's better in the shape of a B than it is in a P. So that's what we're looking for. But all that being said, that P-trap has a little dip in it. And the dip is below where the incoming line is into your sink. Now, the reason why it's below it and not just straight up to your sink is because then you would have a lot more backups. You would have a lot more sewage backups. You would have a lot more smells coming up from underneath it. All the bad stuff that you don't want to deal with ever would be coming at you if you did not have your B-trap. That's what we're calling it. We're rebranding it right now. But if you did not have your P-trap, that's what would happen. It would be a lot of smelly stuff, and it'll be more backup. You have freestanding water that is usually in that P-trap, and that water stops the smell. And it can just prevent a whole bunch of things. That pressure will keep anything from backing up in it as well. Now, the way that your drain works overall, right, is that you have your sink, and then that drains through down into what is called like a funnel or a drain pipe, right? And then that pipe goes up into your P-trap, which then loops up into your actual outgoing line, and then that hooks up to other pipes that are all going towards something called a stack. And your stack is where your bathtub, your toilet, your sink, and a lot of your other things in your whole house can be connected to, okay? You're all kind of sharing one little stack, okay? Now, if you're in an apartment building, chances are they have multiple stacks like that, depending on where you are in the building. But you probably are sharing a stack with your upstairs neighbor, your downstairs neighbor, and all of them go to a larger version of a stack, which then goes to a sewage line, okay? So in this instance, all right, what we are dealing with is a clog that is probably somewhere before the stack. Because once it gets into the stack is way bigger. It's way thicker. If you are having problems only in your sink in your bathroom, that means that you're only having problems from where the stack is all the way to where the actual sink is itself, right? You're not connected to anything else. If your stack was backed up, that's A, way more expensive of a fix, but B, you're going to have backups in your toilet, backups in your tub, and in other places in your home. So that's why we know it's not the stack. It's more than likely just the drain that's going from the sink all the way to the stack, or where other plumbing is meeting at one point. So we're talking probably anywhere between 5 to 12 feet probably of drain. Now, the reason why that matters is because that's going to help us decide what type of auger, what type of snake we may want to use, okay? Now, you can also do something that is kind of more. I guess when you're doing this, you're going to kind of see how it kind of goes by judgment. It's hard to know for sure if this is 100% accurate, kind of thing. Okay, but basically, what you can do is just run the water in your sink, and when you run the water in the sink, the longer it takes for it to actually start clogging and backing up, the farther down the drain it is. If it's something pretty immediate, like it's the P-trap and somewhere nearby, well, it's going to be almost immediate, right? It will start backing up within the first 2 seconds, basically. But if it takes like 30 seconds, well, it may be right in the end of that connection point to the end of the connection point between where all your stuff is going into your stack. Okay. Now, if that is all the case, this is a great starting point. Now you have a good foundation of where you need to go. You kind of understand how this is working. You understand how you can kind of problem solve and diagnose the problem. And now you can kind of understand what products we want to stay away from. Let's focus on what you should do in this moment, okay? So, now that you determined kind of where you think this is, okay, either up close or farther down where the stack is, now you can kind of tell, okay, I'm either going to remove the P-trap and I'm going to immediately go up towards where the stopper is and clean any clog that might be in there, including what's in the P-trap. Because a lot of times that stopper will kind of get things stuck around it. Now, the stopper can actually be removed entirely as well, but that's a whole different discussion. That is really hard to explain in just an audio form when I'm explaining a lot of other things. But if you want to know how to remove a sink drain stopper, you can look that up on almost any platform on the good old-fashioned internet, and you will find probably a pretty gosh darn good version of what it would look like underneath your sink. And they're pretty universal. There's not a whole lot of variation from one to one. So you should be okay in that regard if you want to look into that. But if it isn't your stoppers collecting something or there's something blocking up in your P-trap, if those two things are ruled out, the next one is then you got to clean, you got to pull something out of the drain itself. Okay? This is where I'm going to recommend right out of the gate a Cobra Skinny Drain Cleaner. These are 8-foot to 10-foot products that are great for people who haven't done a whole lot of, plumbing DIY projects before. And the reason why I recommend those is because 8 to 10 feet isn't really going to get you in a whole lot of trouble. And they're 1/8 inch thick snakes. They're not very big. A 1/4 inch, a 3/8. Those are much bigger, and even though they might clean a little better, they're also a lot harder to work with and way more likely for you to get stuck in the drain, and you don't want to deal with that, right? So as far as a sink, as far as when we're dealing with a sink itself, the best options I can tell you is a Cobra Skinny Drain Cleaner is going to do one heck of a job, okay? Now, when you get the product itself, then go to the tip of the snake, the first maybe 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. Take that and bend it at a 45-degree angle. And when you bend it at a 45-degree angle, what it essentially is doing is that when you're putting that into the drain and you're turning that product, then it's going to grab around the elbow, grab around the inside of the pipes when they're curving. That little hook that you're making, that 45-degree angle, is going to pull itself down the drain. Otherwise, it kind of pushes up against inside of the drain. It doesn't always, do the job it's supposed to do. So that's what we're essentially doing. We're trying to make the product work a little bit better in this instance. Now, when you're doing it, when you're feeding it in there, you feed about like 6 inches at a time, lock the wire back down, and then twist, loosen it back up, feed 6 more inches, lock it up, feed it back in there. Okay? So you're just feeding a little bit of that snake in at a time. The reason why, because if you do a whole lot of it at once, it's going to bind up, it's going to twist outside of the drain, but even inside the drain, it might give you a lot of problems. So we want to make sure we're feeding it a little bit at a time. And then once we're all the way in, like we're talking probably, you get anywhere between 6 to 10 feet in there, you should probably solve the problem. If not, that's when you should call a professional anyways most of the time. So that's why I think the drain cleaner is such a good option, because it's not going to get you in too much trouble, but also it kind of is a good indication you might have a bigger problem going on than what you might be able to solve. So if you do all that, then I would do it. Then make sure that you pull it out. When you pull it out, you can kind of clean it as it's going back into the drain cleaner itself, right? Cleaning it with a little bit of bleach is really good. They're really hard to air out. If you don't have a space to like air them out, they can kind of be a pain in the butt. But I have had mine for years, and I clean it with a little bit of bleach when I'm putting it back into the actual shell casing that it's in there. And it's been lasting pretty long. It's been about 2-3 years. It doesn't have any real rusting on it. I don't use it for other when I need it for a drain. So, and I haven't really aired it out. So it's not really corroding that bad. And I don't think you'll have too much problems with it. But since I'm asked all the time, there you go. So once you do that once, I always think it's best to do it twice. If you get a little bit of that hair clog or whatever you have in there, natural buildup or anything, you get a little bit of that out, then I would probably try to see, well, how much of it do I think I got it out? Can I flush it now with a drain cleaner? After you got it out, maybe flushing it isn't a bad idea, which is true. Flushing it with hot water is an even better idea. If you have a 5-gallon pail of hot water, flushing that down afterwards can be a really good idea to kind of make sure you get all the extra debris you may be floating around in there. There's also a different kind of drain auger that you could get if you really wanted to upgrade. Now, the next upgraded product would be your pistol grip drain auger. These pistol grip drain augers can attach to your regular powered battery drill, and then it basically looks like a little Tommy gun. You can bend that tip at a 45-degree angle too, but they're thicker. They're anywhere from 3/8 to a 1/2 inch, sometimes bigger if you're going for bigger pipes and etc. But that bigger pipe, the bigger wire can do a really good job cleaning things up and make sure it's not missing anything. But it can get kind of knotted in there and stuck sometimes. So be aware of that when you're using it. If you ever get stuck with it, just put it in reverse right away and then run the drill backwards, and that will pull it out pretty good. If it doesn't, run it backwards right away. Take your time. It eventually does come. Just a little bit of perseverance when you are doing it. That being said, they're usually between 20 to 25 feet, so they're much longer as well. And be mindful that if you're using it in an apartment, right, that you may be someone else's nightmare in an accident. Now, what I mean by that, if you've ever been on the internet at all, you may have seen these videos that go viral sometimes of a drain snake or a pistol grip auger or any auger of some kind popping through a tub or popping through a toilet, and now it's just like it looks like a snake coming right out of your drain. It's because somebody, oftentimes a maintenance technician who doesn't have a ton of experience, will be using those products and not realize that other plumbing is connected. And if you use too long of an actual wire, too long of a snake, too long of an auger, it can do things like that and scare the crap out of your neighbor. But make a really good viral video, though. So if that's your goal, this might be a good place to start. Now, you may be wondering, though, Mercury, is there any real difference between cast iron and PVC? Like, do I need to be more mindful of these things when I'm doing this? First and foremost, I'm going to say that one of the reasons why this happens a lot more in your cast iron piping, the reason why cast iron piping is a lot dirtier most of the time, it's grimy, it collects a lot of hair. Honestly, cast iron pipes are notorious for this problem because there can be developed burrs inside of it. So what I mean by that is, when you're cutting metal or any metal of any kind, or even when you are like, breaking apart, a soda can, you might see like little burrs, little pointy sharp spots on that linoleum can or any metal that you're cutting at all. That can happen inside of a drain pipe. Now, over time, that drain pipe can be deteriorated. Maybe someone used a lot of Drano. Maybe it got beat up some way, shape, or form of the things that you're putting down the drain. Now, over time, 50, 60, 70 years, it can develop little burrs inside. Now, those little burrs can grab onto hair, grab onto things, and actually develop a much larger problem, right? So that's why I tell people don't necessarily just push it down, pull it up, because chances are when you just push it down and make it go away, it's not going to go away. Any product in that same vein that tells you, hey, you know what? I'm just going to make it easier for it to go down the drain, like the famous drain funnel. I don't like any of those products that tell you, yeah, just let your hair go down the drain. That's not going to cause a problem, I swear. A couple years ago when I first started on a good old-fashioned TikTok, I made a video where basically Drain Funnel reached out and said, hey, do you want to be sponsored by me? And I reached out back to them and I said, no. I know. And I just straight up told them that I did not think that their product really worked. And then I think that it only works in ideal conditions if it does work. And the person said, I've been testing this for 5 years. And then he showed me the test, and it was just plastic clean piping that was only going about 5 feet. And it was PVC. And yeah, in ideal condition with new construction, where no one's lived in it a whole lot, yeah, I'm sure it works fine. But basically what it is a funnel that you replace your drain cover with, and you put the funnel there instead, and then it takes all the water and all the hair that's going through to it and make it into a really tight funnel, and then pushes it down the drain, but like one hair at a time. So that should help prevent larger clogs. Yeah, maybe if you don't already have buildup, So those products that make you do that, stay away from it. I prefer when people use like tea shrooms, or any type of hair catcher products. They do a really good job. I know no one likes touching wet hair. I know that some people have sensory problems and really don't want to deal with that, and I want to be sensitive to that. But I also want to encourage you that, I think it might be best to clean those after every time you use the shower. If you need to use rubber gloves, I highly recommend it, just because that's going to save you a lot bigger of a headache than if you don't do that and you just use a product like Drain Funnel and just let the hair go down the drain. So all that being said, everything that we have just went over, right? Now you put everything back together. And then you can make sure that it's good to go. Run that water. Make sure it's not backing up still. And if you're good to go, boy, good. You did a great job. So just to walk you through the steps, I would make sure that you would turn on that water in your sink first. See how long it takes. The longer it takes, the farther down it is. Then I would make sure that I put a bucket underneath that P-trap. Take off the P-trap. Get myself a skinny drain cleaner from Cobra, then run that down in there. And then once I feel pretty confident that I got whatever was in there, I would close it all back up, run that water again, flush it out, and then you're good to go, okay? If you want one extra step, you could use a sink plunger. accordion sink plungers out there that are really good. I have several at home that I love a lot. And they're basically just a tiny little sink plunger that goes right above your sink drain. And if you close off your overflow drain and then just pump it real fast with your sink plunger, it usually does a pretty good job. Okay? That pressure usually pulls it up and dislodges it. Now, the reason why I didn't lead with that is because I really only like that for when something's in your P-trap or something's stuck in your actual stopper, right? If it's farther down, it goes back into my theory that you want to pull it out rather than push it down. And that plunger will kind of like grab it with the air pressure, and then it will kind of loosen up and go farther down. So in a desperate situation, I don't think they're bad. I think they're really good when you know you're having some problems in your P-trap, or it's not too bad of a problem. Getting ahead of it is not a bad idea. Like if you notice there's a slight slowage, then I don't think those products are bad at all. If you really want to use Drano, I absolutely understand using it in a preventative state. Using it as a preventative method is a better idea. So before you have the problem, instead of waiting for the problem to develop and then you're using it, okay? So I hope that helps you. I hope that I went over everything, and I think that this is a pretty good job. And remember that these jobs are often pretty dirty. They don't always smell real good, but nothing feels better than a little bit of elbow grease and a drain that is doing its job. So hang in there, and I hope it all goes well for you. Next question.
Hello, Mercury. I have an embarrassing question. So I've been getting this in my shower, and I've read that it has to do with drains being dirty. How can I clean them?
For those who are just listening to the audio version of this and not watching it on good old-fashioned YouTube, then we are looking at an earthworm in someone's tub or in their shower, okay? Now, here's the thing. I've been talking about this one for a hot minute. When we are talking about these problems, right, there's a different kind of worry that we're going to have if we're seeing, fruit flies or those kind of worms or maggots. Those are different concerns, okay? That usually means there's dirtiness going on in your drain. That usually means there's some mold going on or something you need to clean out. This is actually where Drano isn't a bad idea. This is a good usage of it. I would always try to use my drain cleaner, my Cobra Skinny drain cleaner, my snakes, my augers. I would use them to try to pull out anything that might be in there and developing that. But chances are Drano is not a bad place to start in there, and using it once or twice in a 1 week period wouldn't be a bad idea if that's what you were dealing with. Now, an earthworm specifically is a different concern. If you've had this happen more than once, and it sounds like you have, then I think we might have a larger issue. Now, this sounds like this is someone who's a renter. And if this is someone who's a renter, then I think you're going to have a pretty wonderful, probably not, great conversation with your landlord. Because you have the wonderful means to tell your landlord that they probably have a cracked pipe. Either a cracked pipe or they have roots growing in their drain. Ugh. Neither one is fun. Now, the reason why I jumped to that conclusion right away is because it's very rare to see an earthworm coming up from the drain. That, I'm trying to think of instances where it would be, and I really am hard pressed. I mean, yes, you can have earthworms that can go up your drain, up the stack, into your actual sink drain and then back out or anything like that. You can have it happen, right? Sometimes you see horror stories of birds flying up through the stack and then flying up through the pipe and then going and getting stuck in the toilet. Sometimes you see those horror stories. I got to tell you, those are extremely rare. It does not happen, very often. But stuff like that can happen. But if you're having worms happen every couple of weeks or every couple of days or even a couple of months, that's a recurring problem that starts not making sense. The math ain't mathing. The chances of that doesn't make a lot of sense. Something is making that more possible. And what happens here is that when people are laying their pipes, when they're building their house, when they're laying the foundation, when they're doing all that work early on, they may not have any trees anywhere nearby. Or all the trees could be baby trees. And when that tree grows up and gets older, those roots become pretty mighty. And they can make mayhem happen underneath the ground and beat the crap out of your sewage pipes. Okay? Many times, these can be massive jobs. $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 jobs. What basically has to happen is that you got to get an excavator, which is a digger, and you have to dig out where the drain actually is, where that pipe is, and then you have to basically put like a sleeve on it. As one way to fix it. You can put like this big sleeve on it that's usually a little bit bigger of a pipe, and then it fits around it, and then you adhere it to both ends, and then you make sure it's good to go, and there you go. That's one way. It's a cheaper way to do it. But then there's also the full excavation, which is basically you dig out as much as you possibly can. Don't mind me. I was just hitting my glass, everyone. I'm very excited. Basically what you do, though, is that you dig out as much as you possibly can. And then you cut that pipe well before the crack and well after the crack. And then you put identical sized pipe in the ground and then connect it both and then put the dirt back on top of it. That's another way to do it, okay? Both ways, not easy. Mercury from the future here. As I am editing this podcast, I am realizing I never told you about bursting. Bursting is like the coolest one. So I am using this video I got from Trenchless Solutions be able to actually show you what's happening. But for those who are just listening to the audio version, there's a hydraulic pump that is going to be on one side of the broken pipe that's in a hole that you have to dig out. This hydraulic pump is going to put this very straightforward pipe that's going to go all the way through. It's going to pump all the way through that broken pipe and push through. On the other side, you are going to dig another hole, and you are going to attach something called a pipe burster. That pipe burster is basically a wedge that's going to go through the old pipe and tear all the stuff up while dragging the new pipe. So it's going to go underground, drag us up all the way to where the hydraulic pump is in order to get the job done. It looks super cool, but it has problems. You are dragging a new pipe through a bunch of old shards of pipe. Bad things could happen. So there's pipe bursting for you. You know, there are newer things out there now where you can basically you'll have like an adhesive or a filler that will go on top of like a balloon type thing that will then go into your drain. And as that person is like funneling into the drain, almost like it's an auger or snake, they will use a camera on this device that will then pinpoint where that hole is. They blow the balloon up that has the actual adhesive or that filler on it. And then they blow the balloon up until it hits the surface of where that crack is. And then they kind of pray a little bit. There's a lot of praying involved in this one. And then they hope that it's going to hold. And then they back it out. Now, hey everyone, it's Future Mercury again. As I am watching this back and editing it, I am also realizing I got this part wrong. Well, it's close, but not quite. And I want to make sure you have all the information. So it isn't really a balloon, it's a membrane. And that membrane is pushed through the pipe all the way through while being soaked in epoxy. Now, it doesn't necessarily use a camera at the tip of it. Typically, they don't do that. Honestly, I don't know where I got that from. I can't find one source that says that's how it's done. But it is pushed all the way through, and then they pull it out that way. So there you go. It's a membrane that's soaked in epoxy that goes through your pipe, and then you pull it out. That's how this one is done. Okay, bye now. Does that method work? I've heard plumbers have really good success with that kind of stuff. I mean, honestly, I joke about it, but it's not a terribly bad method. It's one of those methods that maybe it's worth trying before you spend a whole lot more money, you know? But it's definitely a method you should have a professional do. Please don't do what I would do. And just try a bunch of, farm girl ideas and see which one sticks. You always think, everyone online thinks that, oh, Mercury Stardust, it must be so wonderful to be married to her. She's so handy. She can fix things. Ask my spouse. Ask my spouse mouse how wonderful it is that someone in the house knows how to fix stuff, but has a lot of different ideas of how to fix that thing for cheap. We've had many discussions over the years of knowing when I should call a professional who's a little bit more experienced on that specific thing I'm trying to do. I might have 20 years in this business, but I don't know everything. You don't know what you don't know when you're doing these jobs. And what you don't see coming can sometimes be the deal breaker to all of it. But all that being said, what we're dealing with right here, I wouldn't be messing with it too much. I would be calling the landlord, letting the landlord know this is what's probably happening. Have them come over. And if they don't do much about it, I got to tell you, that's a real bad mistake. I think this is one of those issues that you can call, Department of Health, let people know, the city inspectors and etc. Because there's a bigger issue probably going on that they're not addressing, and get an extra pair of eyes on it. Now, it takes a lot in most parts of this country. In the United States, it takes a lot to be able to get things to actually happen against your landlord. So you might not see a lot of recourse, but they may be like, hey, you know what? This is the third violation or the third time that we've had to come here in the last 5 years or something. You got to do something. You got to do something or we're going to fine you to high heaven. And that could happen. So you never know. I say give it a try. Talk to your landlord. Make sure you get this all in writing. Whenever you talk to your landlord, don't just talk to them on the phone. Don't just talk to them in person. Don't take their word for it. Give them an email. And make sure you get it in writing because you need to document everything, okay? Whenever you're talking to your landlord, property manager, or maintenance technician, make sure you get that in writing, okay? I cannot stress that enough. That's going to save you some headache down the road if you need to, okay? Now, all that being said, go to your landlord, make sure that they are aware of the situation, and then see what will happen from them. They might be really concerned about it because, like, if I saw that, I would be like, oh, no. That's gonna change my entire budget for the whole year. And since you're probably listening to this earlier this year, I got to tell you right now, as someone who used to run a property as a maintenance technician, I'll tell you, this is the time of year where, I got my whole budget laid out. I made sure that everyone and all the higher-ups knew this is how much I was going to spend. And by April, I blew my budget already. Again, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't see what's going down the pipeline. And if you get a problem like this where it's like, oh, you need to take care of it, you can't just let it go because if you don't address it soon enough, it might be even more expensive later on. So hang in there. I hope that all that makes sense to you. And if you want to try to mitigate this problem, yeah, you can use a little bit of Drano, a little things like that to kind of help prevent it from being more of an issue if there's a smell or anything. But if you're seeing an earthworm, it's probably beyond your capabilities. You may need to call in the big guns, and I hope that all makes sense. And if this is a lot for you to take in, it makes you discouraged, I want you to know that you're not the only person in the world who deals with stuff like this, okay? Like, this happens a fairly good amount, and that you're not alone. And I just hope that you can take a deep breath and know that you're going to try your best, and if it doesn't go your way and you are in a position where you need help or anything around those lines, reach out to the ones who love you, Try to make a community around if you need one, and make sure that you rely on the people that you care about the most. And then I hope that all goes well. Okay? Speaking of all goes well, if you're in a need of immediate help, or if you need some support in your life, may I encourage you to buy my book, Safe and Sound, A Renter's Friendly Guide to Home Repair. This is the part of the show where we plug the things that we are doing, and we need your support. Any type of thing around those lines means a lot to us. We have a Patreon. We have a Substack. We have my book and the merch store. We have so many amazing ways to support us. Just you listening to the podcast right now or watching it on a good old-fashioned tube of the U, just doing that makes a huge difference for us. We are a pirate ship here. We believe very strongly in encouraging people to be empowered with their own tools, their own things that they need in the world. When you are walking by one problem after another problem and another problem, it can be such a headache at your home, and it can build up anxiety. But addressing it when you can, dealing with the problem head on, even if it does not turn out the way you want to, can make you feel a little bit more capable. And for those who are joining Patreon and Substack, we are going to be able to give you early access to these podcasts ahead of time. What? We are going to be able to give you early access about a few weeks ahead of time before every single episode. And we're happy that we are able to do that. But if you want to hear those before anyone else hears them, please go to our Substack. Please go to our Patreon and get ahead of the game. All that can support us, and you can get early access to these great little podcasts we're doing for you. Now, all that being said, remember, Safe and Sound Renters Friendly Guide to Home Repair is available anywhere, but please think about going to bookshop.org if you are someone who wants to buy a book online, because they source from independent bookstores that are near you. And we love independent bookstores. We went to about 50 of them in 2023, and it was a wonderful time. Independent bookstores deserve your time, they deserve your money, and they deserve our support. All that being said, let's listen to the last question of the day.
Hi, Mercury. I'm really struggling today and just wanted to reach out. Do you have any mental resilience advice for how hard it is to battle a black and orange mold problem in my bedroom? I'm trying to deal with this over and over and feel sick from it and just want to cry and throw up. It's so bad. I live with my elderly parents, and they don't seem to think this is as serious of a health problem as it is for me living here. I'm doing my best. It's just so discouraging, and I need to feel like somehow this gets better. Sincerely, Kari.
Well, I hope that you're okay. You know, I hear it. I hear these questions sometimes, and I think it's so tough because mold is one of those problems that we get in this industry, and they're not great solutions. Unfortunately, you need a lot of money to mitigate these problems effectively. You know, full drywall restorations. You know, sometimes it involves, replumbing a lot of times. Sometimes it involves, doing something with your foundation if you're having, type of leakage into your basement or anything around those lines. Sometimes there's roofing problems. A lot of times mold isn't just a mold issue. It's an other thing issue. So knowing where to start is kind of the tricky part, right? It's such an overwhelming thing. You're having mold grow. You're trying to communicate to people, and they're not listening to you. And I want to tell you right now, I hear you. You are not alone. I feel like so often I've had to communicate this with landlords and communicate this with various people over the years, and people don't really take mold seriously. And the people who are the most affected by this are people who are chronically ill, people who are disabled, and people who work from home, right? People who have to deal with this all the gosh darn time, and people who are affected by this disproportionately than other people are. So if you're a landlord, I want you to listen to this right now and understand I'm not telling you that you have to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every gosh darn year. But I will be honest with you, if you are providing a home for somebody, I think don't worry about what the law just says. Screw the law. Do what is right. Take care of these people. Help the people out if you're a landlord. In this instance, these are your parents, right? So it's a little bit different, but it has the same through line. They can deal with it. Why can't you? Right? And I know that can make you feel really isolated. And I know that can make you feel disconnected from the parents and the people who brought you into this world, people who care about you and nurtured you. And I understand it can be a lot. But I want to put some things in a perspective that may help you a little bit. Just imagine growing up as a kid and being told, when you're 10 years old or 8 years old, that the paint that you're around every single day is poisonous, that it has lead in it. Just imagine being 15 or 16 years old and then finding out the insulation that you have in your house, the tile that you have in your basement, or the linoleum that you have in your kitchen, all that contains asbestos and is cancerous. Just imagine being told one thing after another that this thing can make you sick. And I think that for a lot of people of an older generation, I think that they've just kind of written it off like everything's bad for you, so I shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing. Like if it's all bad for you, then nothing is, And I think that mentality is so deeply flawed, but I can also sympathize with the notion of what that means. Like I can tell that there's a lot of stuff going on, when people say stuff like that, where it's like, it's just mold or, we'll clean it with bleach and then we won't actually do anything. All that kind of stuff is so frustrating. And I know that can be hard to hear, but I also just want you to understand that like, if you can communicate to them that maybe it's not a big deal to them, but it is a big deal to you, and then give them some research and actual facts behind it. It may work, it may not, but if you haven't tried it, maybe it's worth a try. Your parents, your relatives, the people in your life that care about you, that you're having this issue with better than I do. So trust your instincts here. But I'm going to give you some tools that may help you with this, okay? Now, they're not going to be complete fixes. I'm not going to be able to wave a magic wand here and solve this problem. And to be honest, the only people who could would be trained professionals who understand how to remove mold and how to do this and did actually do this work. I'm not there, so I can't do that. But what I can tell you is right away, I would get myself a dehumidifier. I would make sure this problem isn't going to get more worse than this, okay? I would also try to make sure that if the problem isn't continuously happening, there may be ventilation in the room. That's a problem. This problem can happen for a lot of reasons. Sometimes ventilation will be poor in your house, in your bedrooms. Maybe there's not proper ventilation in your kitchen or in your bathroom, where ventilation usually is. Like, ventilation is one of the most underrated things in your entire house. You have it coming through your attic, right? And the ventilation then goes through the rest of your house, and then it circulates all out. Good air in, bad air out, And you need a lot of that circulation within the house to make sure it's going to be good, that you're going to actually prevent it being too much humidity in there. Now, a lot of times there isn't great ventilation. Maybe there was a modification in the house, maybe that someone put a bookshelf in a certain place, which is weirdly anything that can restrict airflow, right? Anything that can block something can actually cause the problem. Sometimes a window that was left open too long, right? Maybe there's a slight hole in the side of the house that's letting in just a little bit of moisture that is growing up inside the walls and then are coming up in your room. It's so hard to know. Maybe the problem is already solved. But whatever it is, dehumidifier is the next best choice, right? If they're not going to do anything about it, you can at least do something with it. And a dehumidifier, even a small one that can only do like 350 square feet, is better than nothing. And they're relatively safe when you're dealing with something that small. The bigger ones that run continuously should be watched and monitored. If they're in your basement, they're usually pretty okay. But be mindful that if you're using it and it's by carpet or by a lot of fabric and stuff, it might be able to cause some problems. So be mindful of that. But smaller ones are usually A-okay. Now, when you're dealing with the dehumidifier, adding a little bit of mold killer to the wall as well. Where the mold is, I would spray products that are specifically mold killing. Now, bleach isn't a bad option, right? It can kind of, try to kill as much as it can, but you're going to use a lot of these products over and over and over again. It isn't just once and then you're never going to deal with it again. You have to kill the mold where it's at. And if it's growing behind the wall, then you're having a lot more problems, okay? Trying to get to that is hard. So trying to spray it and then spraying it like 2 to 3 times a week, every week for like 3 weeks, that usually can get ahead of it a little bit while also running a dehumidifier. Then add lacquer on top of it, okay? That's going to seal it in a little bit. Now, you could paint the whole thing if you want to. Like mold-resistant paint can do a decent job. There's a product called Kills, and Kills is not bad. It's pretty good. I've had pretty good luck with it when it comes to trying to prevent mold from growing through it. So you can add that, and then make sure that you add the lacquer, and then those two products hand-to-hand can really do a lot to try to prevent it from getting airborne. And that's what we're trying to do. It's trying to prevent it from being in the air more. Okay? And then an air purifier. Now, I have a small air purifier at home that we're a real big fan of. Basil, who's the wonderful VP who's actually not editing, but recording this right now for all of us. Basil has a Dyson at home and loves theirs a lot. And these air purifiers can do a lot for you, especially if you're having, things in the air that you don't want in the air. In this instance, it's mold. A lot of people like these during COVID, right? You just got to make sure you have a product that has like a MERV above. I think it has to be like a MERV above 13 or a 12. That has to be like pretty good. And a MERV, for those who don't understand, is basically the classification of the level of filter that you have, okay? A normal MERV in a house is like between, I don't know, I don't want to say a number, but I'm going to say right now a voice of God is going to say it. And that was after research. So future Mercury is a whole lot smarter than current Mercury who's talking to you. Editing is amazing. All of that being said, that's the kind of MERV that you usually deal with. Okay, so as long as you get the good filters with it and you get a good product that it can actually do, you can do a lot of good stuff for yourself. If you get your dehumidifier, put that lacquer on it, try to clean it the best you can, and then air purifier, that's a whole lot better than doing nothing at all. And if you tell your parents those things, if you say, hey, these are the things I think we should do, and they do at least 1 or 2 of those, I mean, that's a whole lot better than nothing, And maybe giving your parents an option of that is a good way to bridge that gap a little bit. I think that for them too, they may be looking at this like, oh man, I don't have the money, I can't do this, or oh no, like they're thinking about it from a pragmatic standpoint. They're thinking about it from a financial standpoint without thinking about the logic a bit, without thinking about the emotion behind it, and then giving them the option to try to meet you emotionally where you're at. Be like, hey, here are the options I've looked into, guys, and here are the things that we can do. Can you help me do one of these, if not more, all of them, or maybe you do half, I do half, and figure it out. I hope that helps. And if it doesn't, at the end of the day, I hope that you can find people in your life who do listen to you and do support you. And I send you all my love in the world. Like I am very fortunate that in my life I have an extremely amazing human being who's always in my corner. That is my spouse Mouse, who deals with an invisible illness every single day. And through being by their side over the course of the last 9 years, I've learned a lot. I was very ignorant to how people who were disabled, people with invisible illnesses, people who were immunocompromised, I was very ignorant to people's struggles. I did not fully see the bigger picture and how hard it can be. And I just want to send my love out to anybody who's listening to this. I know I see it with my spouse is struggling. I see it with my friends are struggling. And you're not alone. I think it's our job as a community to watch out for one another of all marginalized experiences and uplift each other the best we can when we can. So I hope that helps, and hang in there. Today we learned a lot about a whole lot of different things, from plumbing all the way to mold, but mold can be affected by plumbing a lot. And I think that the through line of all of these is kind of overwhelming, right? There's so many options that can be fixed when we're talking about a sink drain. There's so many options that you can do when you're talking about a worm coming out of your drain. There's so many options that can be had when we're talking about mold. There's so many different directions, so many different things we have to learn in order to even get one thing accomplished. And that can be overwhelming. But sometimes the things that are the most overwhelming can actually be the things that teach us the most. And that's where I put my energy. Every single time I'm dealing with a huge project like this. Yes, I get frustrated. Yes, I don't like it. Yes, I will cuss up a storm. But at the end of the day, I'm also happy that I get to learn enough to be able to help someone else down the road. My problems don't have to be someone else's problems later on. That at the very least, I'm able to address someone else's concerns later. And that's what I keep in my back of my mind when I go through struggles, is that now at least I get to be someone's guide when they go through this in life. And at the very least, I can pay it forward in a way that I wished that was paid forward for me. All that being said, my name is Mercury Stardust. I am the trans Handy Ma'am. I want to say thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week and the week after that and the week after that, because we're back, y'all. But until next time, I want you to remember you're worth the time it takes to learn a new skill. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Handy Ma'am Hotline. Mercury Stardust is the Handy Ma'am, and this episode was produced by me, Basil. Our theme song is written and performed by Rhodey Walker. You can find all of our back catalog of the Handy Ma'am Hotline on our Substack, where I'm also writing weekly update posts. So come check it out. We'll see you next time.
That was great!